And good morning.
Morning.
We're here in Huntingdon today. We're having a coffee together and we're discussing about local politics. So we promised today that we will approach the topic of the Greater Cambridge Partnership proposal. So speaking about buses, the proposed congestion charge, our personal views on this, and take some comments and questions from anyone watching. We'll be sharing, in a minute I'll be sharing with some of the local groups here as well, and also discuss about the impact that this could have potentially in Huntingdonshire as compared to Cambridge City or other areas in the county. So I'm Alex, I represent an area in Cambridge City, Abbey, which for those who have been to Cambridge is the area between the Elizabeth Way roundabout and Marshalls and the airport site, so it includes the Cambridge United Stadium. I am from the Labour Party, I'm the Labour County Councillor there, and I was elected in 2021, so I got to learn a lot about transport policy, even the existence of the GCP around the time I was elected in 2021, but the GCP story of course goes a very, very long way. So I'm here today with Councillor Stephen Ferguson, who's the chair of Cambridgeshire County Council. So Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm a county councillor and a district councillor from St Neots. I'm currently the chair of county council, which means I get to don't get to take part in any debates, but I get to make sure everybody discusses things in a nice, orderly and friendly manner, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And I represent St Neots East and Great Gransden at county council, and what that means is I've got sort of half my division is St Neots and the other half is lots of rural villages as well. So I think these proposals will affect those two places very differently.
Okay, so whilst I share this video on some groups so other people can see it, I will ask Stephen the first question because I'm not sure if everyone watching is familiar with what the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership is or what is currently being proposed, what was in the consultation and what's the kind of timeline for those proposals. So Stephen, would you like to tell the audience what is the Greater Cambridge Partnership and how it connects to the various levels of local authorities we have in Cambridgeshire?
So I've just written an article about this for Cambs News, and the truth is that local government in Cambridgeshire is a bit of a mess. So if we're in Huntingdon today, and so if we walked out of here now and interviewed 100 people and asked them what the GCP are, who the GCP are and what they do, my guess would be that none of them would understand unless there was somebody who was deeply ingrained in local politics. Now, one of the reasons for that is that the GCP was a body that was set up, I think, in 2014 to represent South Cambs and Cambridge City together. So if you added those bits together, they represent 35% of the population of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough together. Yeah, but they don't represent Huntingdon, and so it's a deal signed to bring in funding to sort out some of the transportation problems and to build more houses in Greater Cambridgeshire. And I think the intentions of it were really good, and I think as a body to serve South Cambs and Cambridge City, are we still going? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
It's probably a good idea at the time, but other devolution deals since then have formed other similar bodies, like the Combined Authority, for which Nick Johnson is mayor. Now, most of us will know who Nick Johnson was because we got a chance to vote for him. But the GCP is kind of the people who lead that are councillors from Cambridge City Council, from South Cambs District Council, and also from the County Council as well. And most of us we get to vote for those people, as councillors if we live in those areas. But people in Huntingdonshire don't get any vote for that at all. And I think part of the issue is that because the Combined Authority has struggled in the 6 years since it's been set up, the GCP has kind of expanded to fill the void of transportation problems. So anybody who lives around here, if we went out and talked to people, one of the big issues would be a lack of buses.
Yeah.
And so the GCP have got this controversial, I think, plan to improve bus services across the whole county, by imposing a congestion charge on Cambridge. And so that's part of the issue, is that because they don't represent places like Huntingdonshire or East Cambs or Fenland or Peterborough, should they be really determining transport policy for the whole region? And I understand their intentions, and I absolutely support them in trying to get better bus services. But it's whether they have any kind of mandate to do that out here, I'm not so sure.
I think there's this big question that, of course, came through like a lot of the debate on the GCP proposals about how democratic it is or how democratic any structure can realistically be. And I think it's a very interesting debate because on the one hand, you can argue, well, people who are not in the GCP area will be affected by those proposals, of course, but also you can on the other hand, you can think about what is the alternative, because in my view, like local elections are also not really representative in many areas, because in so few areas you even have a turnout of about 50% of above 50%. So like what would be a system? So for me, for example, like one of the things I was thinking about is, can we have those more complex decisions that affect a lot of people in very substantial ways, to have them through more direct democracy, for example, through like a citizens' assembly. And I know we had a debate on the referendum in the county council, so I wanted to touch a bit on that, because for me, like the kind of instruments we have for democracy at the moment are not really fit for purpose. So on something you need to do consensus, you need something that's more...
So just describe for people who don't know what a citizens' assembly is, can you just describe that for us?
Yeah, I think what is really interesting with the Greater Cambridge Partnership proposals is that some of the initial thinking and ideas, after I read lots of thousands of pages of paperwork on this, came from a citizens' assembly. They did part of their Making Connections work. So a few years ago, they had people who represent broadly people around, in Cambridge, and they said, like, what would you like from transport? And a lot of the ideas around better buses, around some of the bus routes, around sustainable transport came from like a roughly representative group of people. But the question is, could you like end the process? If you kind of like do a focus group and you get the initial ideas for a proposal from a representative sample, a subset of people, can you actually like make this a feature throughout the decision-making process as well? It's like an interesting question for me, because often, because local politics is so party political, like in many ways, I know like you have different views as an independent. I think like in some decisions, it's actually very beneficial to have a view from a representative group of people.
And the point about a citizens' assembly, it's a large group of people who are supposed to be randomly selected, aren't they? So they're supposed to represent the whole community, which is a big problem, and it's a big problem with some of these congestion charge proposals, because you have to ask who it serves as well. So it's easier to say that people on low incomes need buses, and they do, and lots of the rural communities in which I serve have a single bus once a week on market day. It doesn't serve anybody at all. And so there's lots of people living in those villages who you might think are well off, but they're either too young to drive, they can't afford to drive, and it causes a lot of rural isolation. So although, I mean, it's a difficult question, but I'm absolutely in favour of better public transport across the whole county. We have to find a way of paying for it. And a congestion charge, I mean, congestion in Cambridge doesn't really affect me as Huntingdonshire resident, but it's a huge problem. And what we can't do is build a society in which everybody has to own a public car to get around the county. Now, you're a really good example. You were the biggest bus user I know. How long did it take you to get here this morning from Cambridge?
My next question was, how did you get here? How did you get here today to Huntingdon, to where we are at the moment? We're at Commemoration Hall in Huntingdon. How did you get here today?
I'm gonna let myself down, because actually I live in St Neots. I live half a mile from the train station, and I could have got the train this morning.
So why not?
Because I've got an electric car, and I'm one of those awful virtue signalling people who thinks it's all right to jump in my electric car. Of course, it's not. Yeah,
is it fully electric?
It's fully electric as well. It's not a hybrid. And I charge it. I charge it during the night when solar, when wind energy is high and there's like excess energy. So it's about as green as you're going to get, and it's a tiny little car as well. But I should have got the train. That's what I should have done. And there is no excuse for not taking the train.
So what was the time difference?
So it's actually quite quick to get to Huntingdon on the train as well. And do you know what? It's just force of habit. Yeah, I'm backwards and forward to Huntingdon all of the time for district council stuff. And usually I take my car because it's more convenient, which is what everybody did. And that's the trouble. So somebody compared British people with their cars as being like Americans with their guns, and like it's true, it's just convenient. It's something we all grew up using as well. And so I should have taken public transport today, and I'm a bit of a hypocrite for not doing that, but hey.
I think that's a very interesting question for me, is at what point people would consider making the switch. Because, for example, I live in southeast part of Cambridge, and today I came here to Huntingdon. So if I had a car, it would have taken me maybe 35 minutes to drive, and I live very close to one of the big roads, so it's very easy to get out of where I live and drive up to Huntingdon. However, I walked to the bus station to where my nearest bus stop is, like, which is about like 10 minutes walk or so. But then I took a bus to go to the Cambridge city centre, and then I was really lucky today because both buses were on time, and I took the busway until, well, of course, the busway to St Ives that continues up until Huntingdon. So actually this route is not, it's not a complicated route, because a lot of routes in the county you have to change like 4 or 5 times with different buses, and it's never reliable. So the busway is one of the more reliable routes. However, compared to driving, it's like a 2.5-hour investment of time as compared to a 35-minute drive, and I can see why for a lot of people this is not a choice. Like I'm doing my emails, my council emails on the bus, I'm like learning a foreign language, like I'm doing a lot of productive things on the bus, but like not everyone can, and not everyone has this time in the day. And like, if I had to be at work at 7 a.m, would I be, there would be no buses in the first place, but like I couldn't do this. And I think that's something that's, I speak from a personal experience of someone who, doesn't drive, never owned a car, and I have to use all those terrible bus connections. I know it needs improvement, but equally I can understand the perspective of people who don't have that, can't invest this much time in the public transport, and it's a really, really difficult thing.
But and so my defence is that I also have a full-time job. I've got 2 council hats to wear, and at quite a high level as well. With the county council, I've got lots of civic stuff to do. And actually I have to try and fit being a councillor in around the rest of my life, which is the only reason I bought a car. So I didn't have a car. We have a car in the family, but that's my wife uses that more than I do. And so I had to get a car when I was elected to be county councillor, because on Sunday I had to go. I went to Ely on Monday. I was on Wisbech the Sunday before that, and to get across the county on a bus, it would be impossible. And the other issue is, of course, is that most of my meetings are at Newshire Hall, which is the headquarters of the county council, which is just up the road in Alconbury. Can't get a bus there from St Neots, can't get a train there from St Neots as well, which
you
is
have to go to Huntingdon and then 9:05 to Peterborough.
She knows I wouldn't. You can sometimes get a ting. So the ting's an interesting thing, because the problem is you're not going to get enough bus users to make bus services from the villages financially viable. Which is a question: do they have to be financially viable, or should they be a public service funded by our taxes?
And what level the subsidy should be, which is a very big debate as well.
But in St Neots, as the combined authority set up something called the Ting, which is an on-demand bus service, which is like a cross between an Uber and a bus, which means it doesn't have a regular timetable. It will come to close to your front door, and you just have to book it. You don't know exactly when it's going to arrive, and sometimes you have to might have to wait 20 minutes. But actually, that's a really good thing as well. So maybe next time we do this, we should do it from the Ting.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to pick up on a couple of questions from the live comments here before I ask more broader questions about the GCP plans. So maybe this is one for you, Stephen, from David here. What role do you think town and parish council should have? I don't have an experience of being a town or parish councillor, so maybe this is one for you. What do you think?
What role in this debate or in general? So I think one of the tragedies. So we talked about GCP, which is kind of a strange level, but we live in a 3-tier area. So we have, well, it's really 4 tiers. So we have town and parish councils are the bottom level of local democracy, and it's where I cut my teeth. So I was a town councillor for 4 years, 2 of which I was the mayor for. And I think town council is really good because they're people who are really, really involved in local issues and actually stand up for the town. As soon as you become a district councillor, my job is to represent obviously my residents, but I have to look out for the whole of Huntingdonshire, which is quite big. And then by the time you get to be a county councillor, we have to look out, the county is massive, and we have to worry about Wisbech and March, Ramsey, Huntingdon, St Ives, and the Cambridge City. So your focus changes as well. And I'm not a town councillor. I'm less focused on local town issues as well, and it's unfortunate, but it's natural. So I think so what I do in the evenings, because I'm a county councillor and a parish and district councillor, I go to all I've got about 10 parish and town councils in my patch, and I go and speak to those guys like every week. I'm usually at a meeting once or twice a week in the evenings, and what my view on the congestion charge stuff is, I want those parish councils to go out to their residents and tell me how I should vote on the congestion charge proposals, because it's really important that it's not me making the decision for my benefit, but I hear as many voices as possible. And I think because the town councillors and parish councillors are much more connected to local people, I'm really interested in hearing their voices as well. So we don't know what we're going to vote on. Before we vote, I will be asking every one of my parish councils how they think I should vote, and I'll try and pull all those together. And so the truth of it is in Huntingdonshire, I go around to these council meetings and I try and drum up some passion about this. In Cambridge City, yeah, it's a huge issue. Yeah, but in Huntingdonshire it's not at the moment. People don't. Obviously, a small number of people commute into Cambridge, yeah, and their views are important. But most people use Cambridge for shopping, for leisure, for education, yeah. And I think most people in Huntingdonshire would probably benefit from having better bus services, because not many of us drive in that regularly, and if we do, you know, it costs more than £5 to park in Cambridge anyway. You go to Cambridge, it's going to be an expensive day out anyway. So out here, I think it's not such a massive issue. And I think, and the views, I support David saying, I absolutely think the views of parish councils and town councils are really important, and all the people they represent.
There are a few questions, more technical questions about the GCP, the representation there, so I'll take those in a moment. But as you already touched on the subject of listening to residents' views, Stephen, like I had a more broader question around what are the kind of things and kind of concerns you hear from your residents, and I can compare this and contrast perhaps with what I hear from my area in Abbey when I'm door knocking there, when I'm campaigning there. Now, so what are the kind of things that people say to you about this? You said there's like perhaps not as much engagement as Cambridge City because there are different ways in which people are affected, but what are the kind of top concerns you hear like on this, or support indeed?
So I would describe it as kind of mildly apathetic support, because I think, so I've said before, buses are a big issue in Huntingdon, in St Neots, and across all of the rural villages that make up 50% of the district as well. So I think that everybody, almost everybody, is in favour of more buses, and so that's a good sell. And I think part of the problem with this whole STZ discussion is that it all focuses on the negative element, the stick element, which is the congestion charging. So, but what I hear most from the residents I talk to is people are really not keen on Addenbrooke's being inside the congestion charging zone as well, because people, you know, that's a public service. People sometimes have to get to, it's expensive to park at Addenbrooke's if you ever try and park there as well, but people, that's the one place in Cambridge that especially elderly people or people with health concerns have to travel to regularly, and they don't want to have to pay, you'd have to get a bus all the way to Addenbrooke's because it's like 2 buses from here and it would take a couple of hours, and they don't want to have to pay the congestion charge to access the hospital as well. So, and that's one of the things that I think was perhaps, it's been a mistake, and one of the things I hope will be removed as a consequence of the consultation as well. So I'd say the Addenbrooke's thing was the big one for me. But also you have to say Addenbrooke is a large causer of congestion in the biomedical campus, all that kind of part of Cambridge. I don't know Cambridge very well, so I can't really say. But I understand that's a big part of it. And so if you take that out, are you really solving the problem? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are really mixed views on that one in terms of like how feasible it would be, but like also, I mean, from people, from my residents, I actually got people who are like both for and against that in many ways. But I think what's really interesting when I go like every week, I go even outside election cycles, I do go on the doorstep and I ask people about their view, and that it does come up probably like one in 2 or 3 doors at the moment in my area in Cambridge. I mean, it is like one of the top, you know, at least top 3 issues, you know, the top issue for a lot of people. And I think there are a lot of like very specific concerns, so depending on someone's circumstances, so like questions around small businesses, questions around people who have informal caring responsibilities, questions around people who volunteer for our local food bank in Abbey, for example, who live just in some villages outside, because Abbey is at the end of the end of the boundary is Abbey, and then that's kind of boundaries with South Cambs. People who live, like I had some fascinating conversations with people who live just on the last road before the boundary, which is in Abbey, saying that we work in Newmarket and it's like a 15-minute drive to Newmarket. Why would we have to pay £5 just to get out of, like, it's literally like a 30-second or less drive. So kind of journeys, like the questions are journeys outside of the city rather than inside of the city. And there are a lot of questions around the boundary itself that come up on the doorstep, the fee itself, people comparing with other European cities, other countries where the fee, the charge that we pay is progressive depending on various, it's not like a flat £5 fee. It's like a progressive, and I know this will complicate significantly the system and the admin of it, but in a lot of other situations there's a progressive type of fee.
So that admin question is not a question here on the doorstep, but it is a big question as well, because when we talk about this, there seems to be an ever growing list of concessions, which lots of them would support. People who can't afford to pay the congestion charge, people who are on low incomes, people who have disabilities perhaps. But that list seems to be really big and seems to me to be really difficult to administer as well. And we don't want to suck up if we're going to try to charge people to drive into Cambridge. We don't want to suck up loads of that money on administration that you can't spend it on buses as well. So it has to be fair. Another big issue is, of course, people who tradespeople who ply their trade in Cambridge. Having to drive in and out every day is going to cost a fortune as well.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue as well. So there's lots of issues, and it's not. I mean, the basic principle, I think, is all right, and we might be able to make it all right if the GCP listen to the consultation. I think 23,000 people responded to the consultation.
Yeah, it's probably the highest response in any of the local, which is.
But I wonder, but when they were planning that, originally there was no events at all in Huntingdonshire until we complained. So I wonder. I'd be interested to see how many people who respond to that consultation live in Huntingdonshire, which if in the actual county of Cambridge, excluding Peterborough, Huntingdonshire is the biggest district. Like 26% of the population live here as well, and we don't tend to have voices in these things as well, because it might be seen as a Cambridge-centric problem or issue, and that's what I want to have a voice for my residents as well. So I'm trying to get them to understand it and get people to speak up on both sides of the debate.
Yeah, let's take some other questions about the kind of technicalities of it, because a lot of people now who, especially some of my residents that I speak to on a regular basis, they say, well, we completed this consultation, we sent some very long comments, they know it's being analyzed, but what is the timeline for it? What would you expect the timeline for it to be? And I know it's still, it's being analyzed at the moment, but I think for a lot of people, they think, they kind of expected it a bit quicker, or they expect to have a result, I guess.
I don't know. So one of the concerns with consultations on this scale is you're supposed to do a lot of quality assurance on them as well. It does seem like a long time. I think we're hearing yesterday that we're expecting to hear the results of the consultation in June, along with revised proposals. So what's eventually going to happen to this? So we're not involved in any of the planning of this. It's a GCP initiative. But because the County Council is the Highways Authority, we have to approve it, so we're going to have to vote on it on some stage. I'd originally heard that was going to be in June, but it can't be that they're going to publish the consultation results, update the proposals, and we vote for it in June. So I can't imagine that's going to happen. But I don't know what the timescale is, and I don't know what we're going to be voting on, and that's one of the frustrations about this multi-level multi-tier government in Cambridgeshire. Is like, we're the people who are going to get all the flack for voting yes or no, and I'm happy to take difficult decisions. That's what I was elected to do, but we don't have that much influence on the proposals in the first place as well, and I find that quite difficult. And that happens in other things as well. So we just voted on the C2C busway from Cambourne to Cambridge, which is controversial as well, but it's the only thing on the table, and you get the feeling that if I don't vote for this, well, we're not going to get any public transport improvements, and that's the difficulty as well. It's never this or that. It's like this or nothing, and I don't really like that very much. But
I think that's a lot of the difficulties about that. We need to do something about congestion and buses yesterday. So because I know there are other alternatives and ideas and people proposing alternatives, and I want to bring in the question of some of the people proposing the light rail system as well, and some groups advocating for that. But I think for a lot of people, in or outside politics, it's we need something done about the traffic and transport issues we have, and especially the connections to villages, to places where people commute to and from work to Cambridge. We need to do something. We need to do something 10 years ago, and things don't seem to be moving in terms of public transport improvements, in the view of a lot of my residents, at least. In the view of a lot of my residents in Abbey who use the City 3 bus, for example, which is managed by Stagecoach, delivered by Stagecoach. The buses have become worse than they were 10 years ago. They're less reliable many times, and I know this as a bus user myself. So when we speak about bus improvements, I think for a lot of residents, the difficulty for them is to actually trust that the buses can get better, because what you see as a bus user is that they have become worse and the routes are being cut, and the mayor, Nick Johnson, has to step in to save the bus routes, like the Cambridge to Newmarket bus route that I use quite frequently. Had to step in to save the number 11 and 12.
And the 61 between Huntingdon and St Neots, which there's a lady called Mrs. White who gathered 1,270, I think, signatures, real signatures, not online signatures, on Market Square over a couple of days, because she thought she was going to lose her only bus connection with her friends and with the hospital here as well. So it's happened across the county, and actually Nick Johnson's had to step in and is charging a £12 precept per year across the whole county to kind of support those bus services, because the commercial model is failing, isn't it? And that's the problem. Is that, you know, up until when I was a kid in Britain, when I grew up in Brighton, all the buses were run by the local authorities, but Margaret Thatcher changed that, put everything into private hands, and we're seeing the end result of that game now is you can't afford to run these type of public services on a commercial basis. It just doesn't work, and it's not working, so we need to do something different. So I would be in favour of Nick Johnson, the mayor, kind of franchising the bus services and bringing back into local authority control, as they are in Manchester. Andy Burnham's done that, but that's been a massive legal battle to get there. So I think the central government needs to hand us the powers to bring back buses into public ownership, because I think that's really important.
Can you explain how franchising works? Because it's something I often mention on the doorstep as well, that I'm of course in support as a Labour politician. Like, I'm in support of as much public ownership of the essential services as possible and as realistically possible. Well, we have to be pragmatic about this, and what a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know as well before I entered local politics really, is that the local authorities can't just set up bus companies and can't just take ownership of buses and run it themselves, because of the changes that Margaret Thatcher's government did in, I think, the 80s, was it? The deregulation of buses and bus services. So when we say, okay, an alternative model, like a middle ground model, would be a franchising model, like what does this mean in practice? So what would it mean, for example, in Huntingdonshire?
So I'm not an expert on this, but if you go to London, the buses all look the same, don't they? They're run by different companies actually, and from different depots.
Yeah.
But the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, runs the buses. TfL are accountable to him, and that's what it is. Rather than having a situation at the moment where if Stagecoach decide, or any other bus company, or Whip It or whoever, decide they don't want to run a bus service or change a route, we have very little control over them doing that as well. Nick Johnson has some powers as well, but they're kind of arm's length powers as well, and which is what we saw last year when suddenly Stagecoach. Yeah, I'm not blaming Stagecoach, because they're a commercial company, but struggling to make any money because bus usage has dropped after COVID. Decided they couldn't afford to run lots of our bus services, and just cancelled loads of them overnight as well. And that's a problem. And it's a problem at the moment as well. Is Nick's put his £12 bus precept in, but that's still ultimately going to run commercial bus services. And if they can't be run even with that subsidy, then they're going to get cancelled again. So it seems like a temporary reprieve. So, we have to do something. And I don't think that buses should be the only solution, because I think people use buses because they have to, and they use trains because they want to. So, surely the place in the UK with the most booming economy, which brings in the most money, we should be able to afford to put a light railway across our county to take people to jobs into Cambridge or outside of Cambridge and move people around, because it seems really unfair that we're generating all this money for the economy, but we've got such a poor deal in terms of public transportation.
I'll come to some questions and some thoughts around like different forms of like funding transport and mass transit in general, which is like a really interesting debate, and I think a debate for the long term as well. And I think there's kind of two parts of this conversation. There's like, what do we actually have to do in the short term to solve the very real and existing problems that we have in terms of like poor connectivity, like unreliability of public transport and so on, and what can be done in the longer term, like what can we start thinking about now, so like when more technology develops in like 20-30 years, actually the systems that we build now are fit for the future, and they're not just temporary measures that we put in place for the next 5 to 10 years. So I think there's an interesting debate around that. But I wanted to pick up on one of your points, which was around this idea of people who take the bus now, who use the buses, do this because they have to, not because it's like something that you like doing. And to be honest, apart from busway B and busway A, like I really don't like any of the other bus routes, because they take significantly longer, because they're unreliable, and because it's actually much difficult to use your time whilst on the transport compared to being on the train, where I can actually work quite easily. And it's actually, luckily I don't have motion sickness or any sensitivity, so I can still do my work on the bus. But many people do. It's actually not, you can't work in the same way, or like use your time to do something productive and not to waste 5 hours of your day whilst being on a bus compared to on a train. But I want to say something like bring something controversial here, because I was reading those articles around class issues, right? Like in the UK, and like class debates. And there was this headline that really grabbed my attention just from ages ago, which got circulated in many different newspapers and so on, saying that like, well, poor people use the bus, rich people use the rail, and this kind of like class line division. So what do you think about this? Like, do you think that like this is like, there's some truth in the sense of people who, you know, like actually do want to use the bus and like do want better buses? Like, you know, is there like kind of a class implication of that, or not? Or like, you know, is it something that like everyone is using equally? Like, I'm not sure what the data is on this, but it really caught my eye, and I thought like, you know, is it because of the background that I'm from, that I'm like, you know, more okay with the buses, or like, you know, is this something else going on?
So I think that rail in the UK is one of the most expensive railways in the world as well. And so getting the train to London, because I can't get a train to Cambridge from St Neots, so I go to London, is really, really expensive these days as well. So yes, railway is expensive, but it shouldn't be. Again, and it's private ownership, can't do these things and turn a profit, and so they struggle, and so it's really, really expensive as well. So but I don't think that's I don't think it's a class thing at all. So I said that people don't choose to use the bus, but actually I do, because if I would be happy never to drive into Cambridge again. I went to Cambridge last night to watch a concert as well, and a friend drove. But in general, I'd rather get the bus into Cambridge, because I don't like the traffic, I don't like doing the parking as well, and it's just not a pleasant experience. So actually, a fast, reliable bus route into Cambridge would really suit me. But you can't do that now, because if you go and see a concert, the last bus back is 10:30, you're never going to get the bus as well. And so that's the issue as well. It's about having buses that serve the population's needs, that run early in the morning for people who need to get to work, and to late at night for people like me who like to go out for a drink.
Yeah, there's something that actually, like, one of the, I think, the positive things in the proposal, and we can have a discussion around some of the different aspects of the GCP proposals, is the extension of the hours in Cambridge. I'm not sure, like, because I haven't looked into the detail in Huntingdonshire buses, but I know for the Cambridge buses, because I was responding to the consultation, especially like around my local area in Abbey and the bus routes there, they're extending the time, so like they will start much earlier and after, you know, after midnight. And it's like a really, real issue, because often, like, I work in London as well, and if I had an event, even in the evening, even if it's not late, if you have your last bus cancelled, you can't even get from like Cambridge station to like a part of Cambridge, let alone like go to from Cambridge to Huntingdon. And same in the morning. If I have to be somewhere, like if I have to be somewhere at 8 a.m. in London, I have to take a taxi to the station. Because there's no bus, like the first one is like 6 something a.m. So you don't have, like in London, you have the night bus, you have, you know, at least at 5 a.m. you could, I mean, it sounds ridiculously early for some people, but if I have to be at 8 somewhere that's not King's Cross or Central London, like then it's impossible to travel,
So it's impossible to gauge how much people would use buses, because the buses have got such a bad reputation, because they're unreliable, infrequent, not always a great place to travel as well. And I think, I'm convinced that if we build a better bus network, more people will use them out of choice, despite what I said earlier. But I do actually genuinely think, for short journeys, it's a really, really much better. It's better than driving a private car, I think. But they have to have the buses in place. So what happened in St Neots is we used to have a direct bus service called the X5 that went all the way from Oxford through Bedford, through St Neots to Cambridge, and that bus service was great. And then under the last Mayor Palmer, they changed the route, so it didn't go all the way from Oxford anymore. It went from Bedford through St Neots, through Camborne, and then onto Cambridge, which annoyed all of the St Neots commuters, because it added another 30 minutes to their commute. It really upset them as well. And so we campaigned for 2 years to restore that bus link. Finally managed to do it. Stagecoach agreed to stop going through Camborne. But again, in that 2 years, what happened is loads of St Neots to Camborne commuters started using the bus, and now they're really upset as well, because they want to get to Camborne as well. And that just demonstrates that if you do build a bus connection, people do start to use it, and they'll change their transportation. So we talk about modal shifts, which is getting people out of cars and onto buses or onto public transport, and that's kind of that's a good example of how it does actually happen in reality. Sometimes. It's
having a realistic alternative, and the best example that I often do, and it's just ridiculous. Like, although my friends say it's ridiculous, is where I live just outside Cambridge city boundaries in the southeast, to Newmarket. So my partner drives. So usually when he picks me up, it's about like 18. It's not even a 20-minute drive. It's about 18-minute drive It's like straight, like I'm straight next to the main road, and he lives somewhere like a bit outside Newmarket as well. The easiest drive, it's actually like a nice drive to have as well. It's not congested most of the times unless you go to in the peak morning. But then for the bus, everything has to go through Cambridge City, so there's no direct bus that connects like the kind of Cherry Hinton, Fulbourn area of Cambridge to Newmarket or like any of the villages around it. And actually one of the things that I saw in the GCP proposal was this, this route that kind of direct links the Fulbourn area with Newmarket. And I thought that actually we have to think more about routes that don't all go to the city centre, because that is just adding, as you say, it's adding at least 30, 40, sometimes an hour to the journey, because it has to go around,
And the other issue, if you need to get across Cambridge, of course, you end up having to get a bus from here into Cambridge and then change bus to get somewhere else, which adds time to your journey, adds more risk that one of your buses is not going to turn up, and that also makes commuting difficult by bus. So but having more frequent, more reliable buses would solve some of those issues.
I'm just going to read a few more questions from the live chat here. So that's maybe one for you, Stephen, like with your opinion on this. Can the GCP be trusted to deliver improvements that are desperately needed to the bus services? Because the congestion, John says congestion, which will only get worse in the coming decade. So do you agree with that the congestion will get worse?
So do I trust the GCP to deliver these proposals? Well, I believe in democracy and I believe in accountability, and I think both of us quite accountable, approachable people for our residents. But I don't have any very little democratic input into the GCP. So if I had to trust a body to deliver those bus services, it's probably not going to be them. Now, I guess what's ultimately going to happen if it goes ahead is that the combined authority, led by Mayor Nick Johnson at the moment, would be the body charged with implementing them. And I have more trust. I mean, Nick is a friend of mine, and I admire him as a politician. He's had some real struggles in local politics over the last couple of years, but I'm much more trusting of the combined authority, which should be the people who are responsible for public transportation across the whole of the district, or the whole of the county and Peterborough, should be the people who are in charge of this and not the GCP, because most of us don't know who our GCP reps are, don't know how to contact them, don't vote for them, and that's not a good situation for me, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I think there's a more general issue around trust in politics in general in the UK, which has been rapidly declining. Not that it was ever that high, but there is an issue in the recent years it has been declining overall. But for me, as someone who does use the bus system, I think you can have to put actually a lot of trust. Someone who actually uses the buses every day and see how bad they have become over the last few years. I have to put a lot of trust and make an effort to actually even believe that change is possible, and I think it's a very difficult situation. It's with any service, if you see the NHS becoming worse and worse over the last 13 years of austerity, you find it very difficult to think actually this could we could turn this around and improve and be much better. It's a psychologically it's a very difficult thing to do, I think, as speaking as a resident.
And the other point is, of course, is that if we did go ahead and back this, and we do have the congestion charge, and we do have better buses, we'd need to have assurances that that's going to continue into the future. Because what we don't want to do is start charging loads of people to drive into Cambridge, and have, as has happened in the past, the public transport element of it starts to decline and get worse and worse and get less and less usable as well. Yeah. So that kind of guaranteeing to my residents that the GCP, who are for a different area, are going to represent their needs. When times get tough, which bus services are going to get cancelled first? It's going to be the ones in areas like Huntingdonshire, East Cambs and Fenland and Peterborough who don't have any democratic input as well, because that's how democracy works, isn't it? So it has to be managed at a combined authority level at the very least, I would say.
So on the bus improvements specifically for Huntingdonshire, what did you think about the proposals and the difference, increased in frequency and a different routes proposed? Do you have any views on specific proposals?
I can't. Speaking for the whole of Huntingdonshire is difficult because there's lots of rural communities in places like Bolton, which are quite a long way from Cambridge, and that's difficult. So from the market towns, and I can mainly speak for St Neots, they're talking about 3 buses an hour, so every 20 minutes, from very early in the morning until the early hours of the morning. So it's from maybe 5 o'clock till 1:30 or something. That would be excellent. It'd be excellent for St Neots, and it would stop lots of people having to use their cars.
And you can go to your concert and come back by bus.
And that's what I would always choose to do. Always choose to do. So that's great. Now the other issue is, of course, rural villages don't have any buses. So the other element is supposed to be kind of demand responsive transport, kind of ting on demand services. Again, the ting in the thing has been rolled out on a selection of villages. Unfortunately, not my villages, even though Nick Johnson lives in one of them. But in those rural communities, it's been really, really popular as well, and it really works because you don't mind having to wait 20 minutes for a bus you book if you never have a bus otherwise. So so having those kind of DRTs connecting to the market towns where you can get rapid, reliable bus services into Cambridge and around between the market towns would be excellent, I think, as well. So I'm completely in favour of that. But the question is, how do you do that without subsidy? And so we have to pay for it somehow. And at the moment, the congestion charge is the only thing on the table.
I'll just see if there's more. There's a few more questions. Well, an easy one about the representation and what representatives are on the GCP. So Robert asks, do I understand the GCP only has representatives from County Council, South Cambridgeshire District Council and Cambridge City Council?
So I don't understand everything about GCP governance, but it's got an executive board on which there's 3 councillors sit. So there's a Cambridge City councillor who's Elisa Machini. There's county councillor. Who's the Cambridge City representative?
Dave Bajan.
Dave Bajan, who's been very vocal on this. So Elisa Machini is the deputy leader of the county council. She has a seat on that board as well. And it's a Bridget Smith from South Cambs. So you only have those 3 people
who are elected politicians.
So when this was set up in 2014, it was set up by the Conservative administration, and 2 of those 3 seats back then were Conservatives, and now none of them are as well. So it's completely subjected to kind of whims and changes in local democracy, which is something which has also affected this, because rather than having a single party ruling everything, which is the way it was set up, you have quite a lot of disputes and infight where people are putting their political ideologies in front of their residents. Not talking about the current GCP members specifically, but at the combined authority we've seen a lot of that as well, where people are just putting ideologies in front of people, I think.
And of course the GCP, the board also has a business and a university representative as well, and it's something that a lot of people are discussing.
They don't get
to
vote. They've also got an assembly as well, which is lots more councillors from those authorities. So I guess everybody in the county does have some input because the county council sends a representative, but that's a really, really kind of distant, triple arm's length way of electing somebody. So that's most people don't know who their GCP representatives are. Most people don't know what the GCP is, and so I think that's a problem.
Yes, I think one of the basic questions is how do the local structure, who actually has the ultimate decision on transport issues. So what would be your, if you were to be able to completely reform the local government structures of Cambridgeshire, what would you do? Is there an alternative?
It's so difficult. So I'd written an article which I suggested the GCP. So as a short-term measure, I think we have a combined authority. Most people know who the mayor is. Most of us voted for a candidate for the mayorship. Nick won by narrow margin. So for the moment, I think that the combined authority is the people who should be running all this and should be the loudest voice in all this. They're not at the moment. Long term, it's difficult to see. I think Peterborough's got its own financial woes. I think there's a chance that if those woes continue, that it will trigger a local government reorg. And then people have talked about splitting Cambridgeshire into 2 unitaries, a northern one including Peterborough and a southern one that includes Cambridge. And for me, I hope we end up in the southern one than the northern one, because certainly it feels like we've got a train link to Peterborough, which is a great place, but we're definitely more Cambridge looking than we are. So I don't want to, where you draw those lines is really difficult. But I think ultimately that's what might happen, is instead of having county council, we'll have 2 unitary authorities as well. And the trouble with the combined authorities, it's too small. It's only the same size as Cambridge plus Peterborough. Originally it was supposed to be Norfolk and Suffolk. So having mayoral powers across the whole region would be much better, but that kind of ship has already sailed. So I think there's going to be a reorganisation, because it's a mess. So if you live in Peterborough, you live in a 2-tier authority. If you live in Huntingdonshire, you live in a 3-tier authority. If you live in South Cambs or City, you live in a 4-tier authority. 4 tiers of local government. It's difficult as a councillor who represents 2 of those tiers. I know what the difference between them is sometimes as well, and nobody, you can't expect the voting public to understand what the difference between the county council, the CPCA, the GPC is. It's too much and it's a mess.
Yeah, I think that's often what's difficult, also to engage people. This is besides the GCP consultation point, but with any kind of local government consultation, because for a lot of people, and for me, to be honest, before I was elected, it was the council. Like, it's not like all those different levels, like, well, the council is doing this, the council is consulting on this, and you don't know like which one does it go to or who has the powers, and you can't expect, like, residents to be completely informed on all those different layers and technicalities, and have a politics degree to understand like all of those things. And I didn't. I mean, like, even someone who studied politics, I still didn't appreciate the complexities of local government in the UK before being elected. And
I didn't. I spent the last 2 years trying to understand them, and I still don't. I didn't know what the GCP was before I was elected 2 years ago. So you can't expect normal people to. I do want to say though that we might disagree with some of the structures, but I think every single person who's elected to stand for their communities is a decent person trying to do the best, no matter what political party, no matter what their views on the congestion charge. And the same for all the officers who are involved with places like GCP. Some of the GCP officers are incredible. They're working really hard. I've worked really closely with them on the C2C project as well. And yeah, they're good people, but it doesn't. I think democracy works best when it's simple and understandable and accountable. Yeah, and there's a lack of accountability when people don't know who they're voting to what and who's doing what.
I'll take some more. Like, there's another interesting question here. Like, I just scrolling through it. Which is, I guess we can speak for a long time about this, but John is asking. So John is saying it feels like the STZ debate is very toxic and polarized, a bit like the Brexit debate. How can we encourage a more rational and adult debate about how to reduce traffic congestion? What I've been trying to do a lot over the last months, and that's why I do engage on the doorstep on this conversation. I do respond to all the emails I received on this issue with my honest views about this, and having conversations like this one today over a coffee with various people, is because I do think on a lot of big issues we're facing, there needs to be like a middle ground and a compromise, because one solution won't just, every single solution to find will leave a certain group of people out. So I think we need to listen to all the views and see, is there a compromise, is there like a middle ground? And that's why I find it very difficult. It comes back to a very controversial question as well that we get, all of us as counselors, is it a yes or no? And I genuinely can't, because it's like, well, I can't say it's a yes or no until I see the final revised proposals, because it's not a yes or no debate for me. Because, for example, just in one session of door knocking the other week, I spoke to people who are completely against any form of charging on driving, like of any type, just any form of charging, whether it's ULEZ or pollution or congestion or any form of charging. People who are in the middle saying, well, we'd like to see a city center congestion charge zone and maybe with some bus improvements in the city, to people who are saying, well, I'm okay with the proposals if we have those exemptions, if the small businesses are exempt, or if the carers are exempt, or if Adam Brooks is out of the zone, or kind of concessions. And people on the other hand, I spoke to a few voters as well who said, actually, we would like the Labour Party to be more supportive of sustainable travel and actually be more in favor of this. And they were very much in favor of the proposals, and even one of them who thought it could go further. So someone who said, I think they should be charging in the weekends as well. Why the weekend charging is not proposed? So I have this full range of views, even even in one canvassing session, for example. So for me, my job as a counsellor is to see, is there a compromise? Is there a middle ground in this, who tries to include as many views as possible? So what about your experience? What do you think on this issue?
So I think definitely at both ends of the debate, which is very polarised or seems very polarised on social media, there are decent people who have got very real concerns, that we have to listen to. But there's also lots of people in the middle, who could be convinced one way or the other, depending on what the final proposals are. And like all of these things, I'm an engineer, and you start off with a proposal, and then you iterate and you evolve it until you get something which works. And what annoys me is that this has been turned into a political football, where our opposition at County Council are just saying no. Not saying no, but no, we're going to do this. They're just saying no. And just saying no is not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem of congestion, and more importantly for me, it's not going to solve the problem of really poor public transport. And so, the whole yes-no thing, I don't agree with it. I didn't vote in favour of the referendum on it as well, because it's a complex question. It can't be, there's lots of people are going to be yes but, lots of people are going to be no but as well. We have to take their views into account as well, and we have to, somehow we have to solve this problem. So, I do think that with with some changes and with some concessions, we might be able to come up to a working scheme. But at the moment, it doesn't really feel like it because the whole thing's been turned into political football. And all that happens at the end, we'll just be stuck with the status quo, congested Cambridge, no buses, and nobody wins from that at all.
Yes, I think, I mean, I do agree with this. What I don't like is when, it's like, okay, we shouldn't do anything on this. And I do appreciate people who have genuine like alternative methods. So like I had a chat with someone who was advocating for like a workplace parking levy, for example, which I do understand, like it won't raise sufficient funding to have like a very comprehensive bus plan, especially when some of the more heavily subsidized connections, but it's at least like an alternative. And I do appreciate when people come up with, okay, if we don't want this, like what is the alternative, and what are the alternatives that actually we can realistically do locally. I think that's the big question, because for example, I had this conversation with someone who said like, why can't we just raise the corporation tax? So 1% of the corporation tax could go into the infrastructure, from all the, let's say, software companies in Cambridge and so on. But that's of course not a local decision. Like that's like, there are many systems of taxation that are just not in the power of local authority.
Another one that comes up is workplace parking levies as well. But these things have been, the problem is we get to vote on things where all these decisions have been made downstream. We don't get any influence in them as well. So there's lots of great ideas probably that might be able to fund this or partially fund this, but they've all been rejected for a reason, and this is where we've got to. So it's kind of hard, isn't it, as well? The other issues, of course, is that Cambridge is the fastest growing city in the fastest growing region in the whole of the UK. We just finished upgrading the A14 to feed loads more cars into it. About to start working on £1 billion upgrade to the A421, which will make it much easier to drive for the 38,000 people who live in St Neots. So when we don't have as many commuters as some places in South Cambs. That will change as soon as you get a reliable road network. More private car ownership. The number of cars driving into Cambridge is just going to get more and more and more, and so we have to solve that problem as well, don't we? As well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's since the last census, or in the last decade, it's been about, I think it was like actually over 20% population growth, and it's not even counting the developments that started or already planned around Cambridge. So we could see from, let's say, like 2011 to 2030, like Cambridge actually grow by a third, of its current population, and it's just something that we do need to think about. I'm going to have a question from Daniela now. A comment which I think it's actually it's very interesting from like a research perspective as well. Trying to myself trying to read all the thousands of pages of paperwork and previous consultations on this. What I don't understand, Daniela says, is why places like London, which is of course much bigger, is being taken as an example, so as a comparison, compared to perhaps using examples from other cities, other towns that are more similar to the size of Cambridge, or more, having similar characteristics to our county region as well. So then I'll give some examples from Germany. So there are the better examples in Europe that could be more comparable to the situation we have in Cambridge.
Yeah, and London's not a good comparison, and I don't know those places, but I've been to Nuremberg quite a lot in Germany, and they have an excellent public transportation system, underground system, I think. But other European cities solve this problem, so I don't know why it's so difficult for the most scientifically advanced city in Europe not to be able to solve its own transportation problems. It's not the hardest thing ever, but it seems to be partly because local politics is broken.
Okay, on the depressing note, something more positive. So Anna is saying, so she was commenting about the take-up of sustainable travel, saying that it's worth noting that 61% of Londoners use the bus at least once a week, and this is very high, so almost 80%, so 78% for 11 to 15-year-olds. While the underground is an amazing network, buses provide more local links, and I think that's why, even if we had a combination of, let's say, trains, or developing the rail links and potentially light rail in the future, or other options, I think it always needs to work alongside the bus network, especially linking to your point, Stephen, about the on-demand transport. I think for a lot of places the buses actually are needed, and of course there's also the pricing and kind of the business model of it, because buses in general on many routes are cheaper than trains, so they are actually more accessible to a lot of people from lower income, although now like the buses became more expensive as well, but like historically they have been like a bit of a cheaper option depending on what's going on with the trains as well. But for me, for example, now with the £2 cap on the buses, that is something that if I chose to, like, I would choose to take the busway to Huntingdon from Cambridge than take the train, for example.
Yeah, I grew up in Sussex in a seaside community which was about 9 miles outside Brighton. Yeah, I didn't pass my driving test until I'm a really awful driver. I think I failed about 6 times. And so growing up, I used the buses. That's how I got out, and if I couldn't get a bus, I used to have to walk home. So I absolutely agree that people, if you have reliable buses, people will use them. And those people, so people in St Neots has got 38,000 people, but almost no tertiary education. So there's a small sixth form there. But most people, if they finish their GCSEs, want a wide range, have to go to Cambridge. Yeah, and that's really difficult to do on the bus as well. So young people accessing employment and education is a really critical part of all this, I think, as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I also think like one of the interesting debates around how integrated or non-integrating this transport strategy is, and whether like we can have like a more coherent transport strategy for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough for a combined authority area. But even like I think we also have to think about neighbouring authorities. So especially West Suffolk, for example, is a good example, especially because of the Newmarket to Cambridge commuters, and I'm sure like there's very similar travel patterns in other neighbouring authorities. And I think also what's often like lacking as well is a more integrated approach. Because often you have one particular project focusing on busways, one focusing on cycleways, one focusing on maybe like exploring the possibility of some railway expansion or something else, but they don't really work together because they're all managed by different authorities.
There needs to be connectivity. So yeah, my friend Matt's always saying getting across Cambridge is the real challenge, isn't it? Getting a bus and changing a bus to get to the science park or something, that's not really a workable solution, I think. So there has to be a properly integrated network.
So there's, I'm not sure about this one. It's a very interesting question from Matt here. What would take for the combined authority to put in a successful bid for transport funding? So
I've written about this in a. If you go on Twitter and follow me, you'll find an article that's been shared quite widely as well because there was this multiple devolution deal. So 2014. The GCP was created, and then a couple of years later we created the combined authority, and both have a similar remit, for public transportation. So there isn't any real reason, I don't think, that the combined authority, which is the public transportation body, can't absorb the GCP and take over all of its funding as well. So that's what we should be doing. That's what we elected Nick to do, and hopefully he can do it.
Another interesting question from John up here about the tourist tax. So saying Madeira introduced a €2 a day tourist eco tax in January this year, was happy to pay it when on holiday as the money is invested directly in infrastructure improvements. Would you support a tourist tax for Cambridge? It's something that actually recently I looked into the different layers of authority and the practicalities on this, because as I understand, I'm not sure if you know more about this, you don't have the local council can't just simply decide to put this through, like it needs some central government agreement and of course the involvement of the business improvements board as well. Like I'm not sure exactly what the structure is, but I think if I understand it correctly, it's not something the local council can just decide we're going to do this and then set the level of it. Do you know more about this topic?
So I think one of the issues, I don't know if it's been done anyway, it happens quite often in Europe and America that you just look at your bill and you pay some sort of city tourist tax on the bill as well. Doesn't happen I travel a lot in the UK, I have travelled a lot in the UK, and I've never seen it here.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So I think maybe that means that there are obstacles to doing it. But the other issue I think with Cambridge is that Cambridge is a big tourist destination, but it's like a day trip. People don't tend to stay over in Cambridge very much. So I think people have done the calculations to suggest that it wouldn't earn that much money. So that's probably a reason why it's a non-starter. But any way of funding better transportation should be looked at, I think. Somebody else has said here that they think, what's in it? Sorry, can I just scroll this guy here, which is Dave, who's saying that the whole idea is awful and he's fully rejecting. There are not lots of people that say yes. but hardly does anybody want in favour of charging. Nobody's favouring taxation. Well, ideally we don't. I don't want to pay council tax. I don't want to pay income tax, 40% income tax rates, whatever it is as well. So yeah, people don't want to pay taxes. That's true as well. What he's saying, reverse the reduction of car lanes. Oh, so he's basically suggesting that the congestion problem is to do with roadworks and restrictions on car use. But we spent £1.5 billion on the A14 upgrade, another £1 billion on the 421 upgrade as well. We're just driving more and more people into Cambridge, and so that's only ever going to get worse. I don't think that any kind of internal measures to change traffic in Cambridge are going to work. There's lots of conspiracy theories that the County Council and the GCP have conspired to put all of these roadworks in place during the consultation, but County Council can't do those things. We're too busy trying to fix potholes. We don't have the resources to fuel conspiracy theories to convince people to vote or talk one way or another. That's just nonsense. So
I think it's interesting because I think it refers to some of the GCP projects on some of the roads in Cambridge, that what they did is to in some roads more clearly separate the cycling from the driving, but in some roads actually installing a separate cycle lane. And clearly mark it as such. And I think it's again one of those debates where you can't win either way, because on the one hand you have drivers, including many of my friends who say we actually do want the cyclists to have a separate cycle lane because they also feel as drivers it's like more dangerous for them as well, and they would prefer to be segregated. But then of course once you install the separate cycle track, which makes it safer from like a variety of perspectives in terms of road safety and not mixing the different traffic, then people say like, well, but it takes away the car space. So I think it's one of those debates where you can't really win either way, because if you do separate it, it's better from a variety of points of view, but then it does reduce the space, which gets you the objection on the other side that you have fewer, you have less space for the cars. So, I mean, I tend to prioritize the safety arguments. I do think, I say this as someone who doesn't ever cycle, right? But if I was to, I would probably not cycle on Newmarket Road or some of the roads in Cambridge unless it was segregated, because I would be, to be honest, afraid. Yeah. But that's just me as a non-confident person, and I'm not a cyclist, so I can't speak for everyone, of course. But I think there's advantages in actually encouraging more people to cycle, because people who are not confident to cycle, they just wouldn't unless it was a segregated lane, and it's the beginning.
Yeah, and that's cycling inside Cambridge. But for people, if you want to cycle from St Neots, which is only 18 miles from Cambridge, with an e-bike, even with a rubbish cyclist like me, that's achievable these days, because you're going to have a motor to help you.
Have you done it?
I have. I've run from Cambridge to St Neots, and I've cycled several times. But it's really, really dangerous. You can't go along the 421 because you will get killed, And so you have to take all these twisty, turny, non-direct back routes, which people bomb along in cars, And so I couldn't commute into Cambridge. And the sad thing is, we're spending £1 billion on the 428, 421 upgrade. There's no provision at all for active transport use, and that's a crime. So I think, drivers get a pretty good deal in general. So anything we can do to help people get around without creating loads of CO2 emissions and loads of congestion, I think should be welcomed.
Yeah, there's some more comments about London being a bad comparison because it already has a multimodal transport network. Yeah, I do tend to agree with this. Actually comparing with some European cities. Although often people like UK-based comparisons, but that's the problem that there are very few places in the UK that have transport rights, so you can't really find a lot of good examples to have a kind of British-based comparison. Although it's interesting, some of the stuff that's happening in Manchester, for example, with the franchising, in terms of speaking about bus franchising, there are some good examples there as well, outside London.
So John Morris's question here, what happens if the money we raised from the congestion charge was ring-fenced for infrastructure improvement? So an interesting comparison is that under the previous mayor, James Palmer, he was looking to build a Cambridge-wide metro scheme, which got really expensive, it was looking at £4 billion before the inflation issue. But although the local Conservatives are now completely anti-congestion charges, that was going to be funded by a congestion charge as well. And so ultimately, I think that the government, the Conservative government of the country for the time being, is also in favour of road charging to...
Well, they have the all-party parliamentary committee that published the recent paper on national road charging. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that does upset me a bit as well, because the idea that this is only debated in Cambridge is just not true. There's so many places that do consider sustainable transport, and it's not that only politicians from the Rainbow Alliance in Cambridge decided to think about this topic. Actually, this is considered by national government with a majority of Conservative members as well. Although, I have to say the idea of national road charging and pay per mile kind of system is very different to, a local form of taxation. But the advantage of having something like a local system is that you can actually ring fence the money locally. Whereas if you had something like nationally, if it was implemented in a few years' time, it will all go to as I understand it, will go to the treasury and then be distributed. So I'm not sure what you think about this idea, because some people say, like, isn't it better to just, instead of doing local schemes, like, of course, Cambridge, Oxford, whatever, London, to wait until the government decides on whether they go ahead with the national roads charging plans or not, and have a system like across the UK. I mean, that's something that I did get asked, and I'm not sure like how far they went. I've just seen that all-party parliamentary group paper, but I don't think it went anywhere really. It was. But they are considering
waiting for the government. With another component of all this is East West Railway, which there was a consultation which closed a year and a half ago. We've got no information on routes. Government said they're going to build it, can't afford to build it. Waiting for central government to deliver things. They change their mind at the moment on a month by month basis. So I don't think that's a good solution.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the argument that I think the public transport infrastructure is, especially outside Cambridge City, but even within Cambridge, some Cambridge City roads very poor, and it is just like, shocking sometimes. Something needs to be done in the short term as well as thinking about the longer term as well, and that's the kind of the risk of waiting till, central government does something, or waiting till a potential government change, or waiting until like a new devolution deal or like a new change in local structures. It means that you have all this space of potentially, many years, potentially over a decade of going back the option of do nothing, whilst everything is declining in terms of bus services and the congestion is increasing as well. So I think it's a difficult position in terms of like being able to separate the kind of more shorter term and longer term measures as well. Okay, so Joanne said Manchester has recently announced plans to introduce a tourist tax. Check it out.
That's what happens if you elect a Labour mayor, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah, I have to say I have to read more on this topic because I don't understand who exactly decides on this
I think Andy Burnham is doing a great job in trying to solve similar problems, but in a bigger city than Cambridge. But yeah, we have to try all of these things, or at least look into them.
So Andy, like Andy's comment here, it's just like trying to scroll up. We should have a complete bus lane from all park and rides. People would rather sit in traffic in their own car than on a bus. We need a complete dedicated bus lane which are straight through into Cambridge, not stop-start bus lanes.
Yeah, and so one of that controversial thing we voted on last month was the Camborne to Cambridge busway, which is to build mostly a dedicated bus link, and even that is highly controversial because it involves digging up part of an old orchard. And people think that part of the solution should be on road, and every single. The problem is every time we try to have these debates, there's 9 years of history, 9 years of rejected options, other external groups proposing new options, and it's really difficult to make a decision because we can't do that. We have to vote yes or no as well. So even direct busways are controversial. I think that's the GCP's plan for improving transportation into Cambridge is I think 4 busways. Is it 4? Yeah, there's already one from St Ives, which is well used. Yeah,
there's, of course, the C2C, which is
It's probably going to be built now after planning.
Yeah, it depends on, of course, the possibility of public inquiry, and ultimately the decision is with the minister, as I understand it, on this. But then there's the South Cambs, the GCP have the CSAT, the South Cambs one as well. That is, I'm not sure what stage is it in, but I think we can find it on the GCP's website. But I think that's part of the proposal on this. But of course, some of the routes can't have a separate busway either. So that's the point of trying to think this in the context of reducing congestion and promoting active travel, because what you don't want to end up on the on-road routes, so for example the Cambridge City routes, is all the buses stuck as well, because that wouldn't be reliable either. And I do agree with rather sit. I can't relate because I don't have a car, but probably for a lot of people rather sit in a car than sit on a bus if you have to be 40 minutes there in either case anyway, stuck in traffic. So or however long you are on a Monday morning trying to get the bus route from Fulbourn to going via Addenbrooke's and like the train station and in that kind of area.
Because modern cars are safe, comfortable spaces, aren't they?
Yeah.
Air-conditioned spaces in the summer as well, and heated spaces in the winter, which buses aren't always as well. So
No, but some of the buses are so cold in the winter. I remember when it's like -2 degrees, I was like freezing on the bus, some of them every day. Although I have to say the busway is probably one of the best ones because now it has Wi-Fi as well. I can charge my phone, which on some of the other Cambridge buses you can't. So yeah, that's you have to incentivize people to use it.
Do you feel safe on buses or not?
Yeah, I personally do, but so I also feel safe like just walking at ridiculous times of the night in Cambridge City, and I think this is to do with the fact that I lived in more dangerous places.
I was going to say you're a rock-hard Romanian as well. This is easy for you.
Yeah, I think growing up in Eastern Europe it makes you think that like everywhere in the UK is very safe. Joking that there are safe places like in where I grew up as well. Not everywhere is dangerous, and of course they're like very kind of like there are places with a high criminality rate in the UK as well, which you shouldn't like underestimate some of the challenges in some of the places. But I do think I do because I always had this, so like I don't have a point of comparison. So I think the difficulty is for people who are, mainly driving. It is a big switch because yes, of course, it's more uncomfortable, it's unreliable at the moment, and I think you need to have the incentive to do the switch. And of course, there's a bit of a difference, I think, like using a bus during the day in Cambridge City than using the night bus in London, which I did use many times. So like in terms of how safe you're able to feel. I did a little, just as a side point, I did a TikTok video on how it feels to be on a night bus. So it's like just you sitting on the bus minding your own business, and then there's like this male character like just saying like nasty comments.
So and it's quite distressing that the male character happened to be Alex with a beard as well, which is, I think, rather discriminatory against bearded men. They're not all like that.
Yeah, but I think that those are things that can be improved as well. Like the busway is better because it has, for example, Wi-Fi, it has charging points. Like those are things like the security could really be improved on some of the public transport, and I think there is technology to do that, so people actually feel more safe. Because I do agree on some of the routes you probably wouldn't necessarily feel safe at night. But also linking to the cycling and safety of cycling, John is saying here the main reason that people give for not cycling is that they feel it's too dangerous to share the road with cars unless we provide joined up safe cycling routes from Huntingdon to St. Ives, for example. Then we will fail to get many more people cycling. I do totally agree with that. It's not safe on so many routes.
And you go to some European cities where cyclists have complete not control of the road, but they're the dominant road users as well. So you go to Amsterdam, everyone's on a bike, and that's true in quite a lot of European cities. Leuven being another example as well. And car drivers are more scared of cyclists in those places and tend to drive a bit slower and a bit more considerately as well. Although having tried to run around Amsterdam as well, it's really pretty difficult being a pedestrian because of the number of bikes as well. So.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point around like some of the green spaces, especially some of the ones in Abbey in my area, because you have the walking route, so I'm usually there as a pedestrian, and you have the shared cycle and walking space, and in a lot of the parks and the green space don't have the space to segregate them either because of how it's built, or like of course if you were to you'd have to expand and take away some of the green space, which you don't really want to do. And now with the e-scooters, with the electric bikes, and especially with delivery drivers and so on, there are a lot of my residents do raise this, that it can be quite dangerous for pedestrians in some places, but again it's like an issue of regulating, because for example there are a lot of people using the scooters that they shouldn't really be using those in some places, but they still do, so it's like a police issue as well as a regulation issue as well.
Last time I walked through Cambridge, I was intimidated by all the other, it's the scooters mainly come whizzing past you all the time, and it's difficult as well because I'm not the most coordinated people and will probably hurt myself or somebody else if I stumble into a scooter going past. So.
Yeah, but I think there's something around speeding issues, and scooters. They're not the ones that you rent out from the Cambridge spots, from voice scooters and so on. It falls into the police remit really to regulate those kind of things. But I do think we need better guidance for this, because a lot of people actually do have their own scooter and don't know that in some places you actually can't. You can't ride it on the pavement and stuff in that way. Let me see if there are more comments. So yeah, Matt is saying that the problem with any of these taxes to fund infrastructure is that Cambridge is small but projected to grow massively. So there's a chicken and egg situation where investment is needed upfront to support the growth that then brings the revenue. Yeah, I think that's what I was saying about like the shorter term, let's say like some of the bus solutions, and the longer term like transit options, because I think if Cambridge continues to grow at this rate, probably some of the busways wouldn't be enough either in the long term.
No, and it will. I think it's going to completely change the face of rural Cambridgeshire as well, which is unfortunate as well because I serve rural communities. But I think the GCP deal talks about, I think, 32,000 new homes in 50 years. The Combined Authority deal talks about 75,000 new homes. Looking, Bedford Borough Council and Central Beds Council are building massive developments right on the borders of St Neots as well. Yeah, and if EWR goes ahead, EWR is really just an excuse to open up land for development. And so that whole band from Bedford through to Cambridge is going to be one conurbation of housing, and that's the reality of living in one of the fastest growing cities in the world, I think, or near to it.
Yeah, there's a link here for people to check out. There's the Hans Walking and Cycling Group supporting active travel in Huntingdonshire. Do you know about this event?
Yes, so John Morris, who's the leading voice in that, is a very firm and loyal and consistent supporter of cyclists and pedestrians as well, and does a great job of doing that as well. So that's a really nice community and one that's worth joining as well. So there's a link in the comments as well on Alex's Facebook page.
Okay, that's great. So
I think
check it out.
you need to put a link to your TikTok as well, so people can see you, see how great Alex looks with a beard as well. Surprisingly. Maybe next time we can get a filter on and you can have a beard as well.
We can do a TikTok live next time, but I think most of my videos are about buses and complaints about buses, but I do think I should do more like about walking as well. I did a couple of them recently around like walking on some of the most beautiful walking routes in Cambridge, which people usually don't even consider walking because you look on the map and it's like 50 minutes, I'm not going to walk 50 minutes. But if you're able to, actually some of those walks, especially for the weekend or when you have a day off, they're actually quite nice. Many people don't know that you don't have to walk on the main road in Cambridge, and so many walks you can take. You can walk by the chalk streams, for example. There's so many like hidden walking routes in Cambridge people don't know about, and now I'm trying to promote them a bit more as well.
I think you're saying your TikTok is about the struggles of being a bus user. Sometimes, so some people on one side of this debate are saying, well, we don't use buses because buses are awful, but actually that's the point. Is making the buses better, and so hopefully, as public transportation improves, your TikTok will get less stressful and more pleasant experience for everyone.
Having some positive views. I'm going to take a couple more comments before we end this session, but I think we can repeat this and like chat about different topics because I see there's a lot of engagement and people do like to comment on those transport issues.
And maybe get some other people from other sides of the debate along as well. I'd love to talk to some of my conservative friends have also suggested they'd like to come and talk to us as well. Having honest and open discussions about complex issues I think is really good for democracy. So
do let us know in the comments if you'd like Stephen and I to speak to our opponents in the county council on
friends.
the live.
They shouldn't be opponents.
Well, politically, I mean,
on the opposite side of the chamber. And we're in a coalition of 3 different parties here, 4 different parties at Huntingdonshire as well. And actually that's been a really good experience for me because it's about compromise, isn't it? And about having to listen to even the socialists like this lady sitting next to me. It's important to do that things as well. And politics should be more about kind of trying to agree on things and solve problems together than silly confrontations, which is why if you tune into some of the county council meetings, that's sometimes what you see, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, I think there are some things that are like bigger than the kind of council politics, and like transport is one of those areas where you really do need cross-party working because otherwise everything will just get delayed and never done and just postponed forever, and then you'll end up with the same problem worse later. When I think a lot of progress can unfortunately be blocked by party politics, really. And I don't speak only about Cambridgeshires here. Like there's like so many examples across the country when like good ideas or like actually necessary things didn't go forward because of various political issues. So I think that's why we need more conversations on a cross-party basis on some of those. It's the same with the climate emergency and the climate policies that needs a cross-party conversation. It's not one of those. It's not like a very local issue that I can.
And actually, we inherited the county council administration from the Conservatives, who did a really good job of putting solar panels on parks and parking rides and building solar parks. They gave us a really good start as well. So lots of these issues are problems that we can solve together, which are completely independent of party ideologies.
I'm going to bring in one comment from Finland, actually, because of course we spoke a lot today about my experience in Cambridge City and your experience in St. Neots and Huntingdonshire implications of the GCP proposals. But it's interesting because of course there are people in East Camps, in Finland, and in South Camps as well who are very engaged with those debates. And I have a question from Neil here, which came in yesterday when we promoted this session, saying that commenting about low income exemption and kind of like making sure that people who can't afford a charge are not severely impacted. So Neil is saying, if I was doing my job in Cambridge and I had to drive to work, say for example if I lived in the village with no public transport links, I'd hope that something would be done financially to help me if the charge was implemented. And this is an interesting comment. He says in defense, the drum that's being drummed politically by opponents of the charge is that they're coming for you next. So they're coming for you next in Finland with such charging. So the theme in Finland, he says, from his experience as a resident, is that things are being ideologically driven, and then the next step is congestion type charges up here, up in Finland. And Neil says, I've seen no evidence of this locally. But having said that, I wouldn't support a congestion charge if there was one in Finland.
But up until the GCP, up until 2 years ago, I'm not sure it was run by that. When it was formed, it was run by the Conservatives. Yeah, we had a very narrow victory by 3 seats, I think. I won by 9 votes. At County Council. If that election had gone the other way, it would be the Conservatives pushing through similar things. James Palmer wanted to build his metro using congestion charging as well. So to turn it into this political, ideological battle, I call it a rapidly deflating political football, is what it's been turned into, is nonsense, because they would have had to do the same thing. Because these problems aren't solvable without some sort of external funding. So. And it's going to keep coming back to congestion. I think when was it 2015, the Conservatives, or maybe before, tried to put through a congestion charging proposal before. So it's not party political. It shouldn't be, although it's been portrayed as that. So I think that is true. And I bet you actually most people in Finland are not very engaged in this, as in most people in Huntingdonshire aren't really engaged in this either. And certainly people in Peterborough, doesn't affect them at all, does it? The buses might do, but they don't.
Well, one of the interesting things is those conversations have started long before either of us even were engaged in local politics. So I was watching on the GCP's YouTube channel a video, a presentation from about 8 years ago, and one of the things on the slide was the ideas to kind of manage congestion. One of the things was a peak time congestion charge in Cambridge. So those things didn't come out of the current the last 2 years. There are such things that have been considered. I saw a post by I think it was one Twitter thread around, I think it was 1993 or 1994, the Liberal Democrats in Cambridge saying, is the congestion charge the answer to Cambridge's traffic problem? So I think even before I was born, those things were discussed. And
1993 was before you were born?
Yeah, I was born in 94. But just to show, for me, it's interesting from a historic point of view, in terms of local government history, that so many parties were in charge and those things were debated. But of course, it didn't come to consultation at such a big scale until now. And I actually think it's a positive thing, because actually now we get to hear all the different views. Because before, when this was proposed by the Conservatives, by the Lib Dems, by other parties, by other coalitions, it never got to this point of public engagement and consultation. And I actually think that's a good thing. Because what happened before was this is they can be unpopular, or just going to get rid of it, or we're going to not speak about this anymore. Or I think we do need to speak about this, because the problems, as you say, wouldn't be sorted unless we think about solutions.
Yeah, and if it's not going to be this, then we have to find a solution as well. So I'm happy to have these discussions. Happy to try and influence GCP to update their proposals in response to the consultation feedback. Because why else do consultations if you're not going to change? So I'm hoping that when we finally do vote on the GCP STZ proposals, they're going to be a lot different than the ones we've seen already. But I'm not that optimistic. So we'll have to to see. And actually, I don't know which way I'm going to vote. Yeah, I've been quite public in saying that I don't support the GCP and don't think GCP's got the mandate to do this. But if a really good proposal comes along, then I might have to vote for it. And actually, I'm going to wait to see what that proposal is, and I'm going to ask my residents, and mainly vote from the perspective of Huntingdonshire. It doesn't have a loud enough voice, but of course, considering some of your city residents as well, who are the people who are going to be most impacted by this.
Well, a final comment, which kind of brings us into like a wider debate around social attitudes. But Robert here is commenting that this requires social attitudes to change, as per the attitude to smoking. We need to think public transport, not private transport. Otherwise, will not meet climate change necessities. This needs to flow from the governments to local representatives, and then into changes in investments and taxation. So, like more kind of central government approach, saying, well, we are in this climate crisis. We need to change the social attitudes around this, rather than like kind of like, you know, one-off local level solutions in different parts of the country that don't have this integrated approach, as we spoke previously about, to actually meet climate targets. I think it's a very fair comment, because a lot of, I mean, like, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but like a big chunk of the emissions locally are from transport, and like I include buses in this as well, because a lot of the buses are not electric at the moment. So I'm not sure what you think.
Just the mayor of Huntingdon. Come and sit with us.
Would you like to comment on the?
The mayor of Huntingdon has just arrived late. He's one of my favourite people, literally.
So,
Are you sure?
He's also, this is come and fit in.
Okay.
He's another beautiful bearded man as well.
Okay, so we're just about to, like, we're just reading the last comment about from Robert here, saying it requires a change in social attitudes to actually make any kind of model shift in transport. So I guess to end with the question to you, David, like as a bus user yourself, like what do you think needs to change? What are the next steps in all this debate? And any kind of thoughts on...
Just put him on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quiet coat.
I think it's a couple of things. One, and I can see Bob's comment there about smoking. One of the attitudes to smoking, if you think about it, have changed incredibly quickly. If you've gone from, so when I started my working life, it was normal to light up. You would sit at your desk at work smoking, and really in 20 years, you can't do that. That would be a weird thing to do. So things change less quickly than we expect in the short term, but much more quickly in the long term. I think there is probably a critical mass point where we get to a point where buses actually become a preferable way of travelling around for a lot of things. Now, there's a few things that could cause that. The roads. Driving in and out of Cambridge is a chore, for instance. But also, it's when it becomes easier to, say, I'm going to go to St Neots, say. When it says, well, actually, I'm not going to bother out parking. I'm just going to get the bus because there'll be a bus every 20 minutes, and it's easy. Then people start making that shift. I think there's a couple of things. Now, it is not often that I praise Ken Livingstone, but there's a couple of things that he did in his first term as Mayor of London, which were really important. One is simplifying the bus fares. And I don't remember, there was a fried egg model, but so there was a simple, integrated, simple way of travelling around, and you knew what the bus fare was going to be. The other big thing with London is that it's an integrated transport system. So you can go to journeyplanner.tfl.gov.uk, and you've got one thing that is set up for London to plan bus routes, tube routes, train routes, and cycling and walking. If we could have some form of franchising so that you have a common identity, common promotion of buses, but also how buses link up with trains, how they link up with cycling and walking and so on, I think that would make a big difference. And it can be even just little things to make buses more pleasant to use. Look at the state of the bus stops at the moment. Stop me when I've gone on too long.
Yeah.
I'm saying this as somebody who is, I'm the mayor for another 12 days. I don't know who's responsible for the bus stops in Huntingdon. I've actually got freedom of information requests out at the moment to find out. District have some of them.
different contracts. They contracted out some of them.
Oh no, some are contracted out, some are their own, and I'm trying to find out who's got which contracts. County have got some, combined authority haven't got any, and some are just done by the bus companies.
And some have been sold to like advertising
Yeah.
companies, and the one in near its High Street is derelict,
Yeah.
you know, and we have to quit complaining. Get them to, if somebody smashes it, it never gets fixed.
And
So-
if it's the company I think of, they're exceptionally difficult to deal with, which I found really quite frustrating. You know, even the courtesy of a response would have been nice. So it's things like that. If you could have an integrated system that says, well, actually, we're going to go to the bus stop. There will be a bench. The windows will have been repaired. There will be an up-to-date timetable, and there will be a map explaining how you can get the bus to the train station, and the bus will match up with the rush hour train. Oh, my sandwich has arrived. Thank you.
Here's a sandwich just been delivered by the deputy mayor.
Yeah.
But we're in the Commemoration Hall, and you need to visit Huntingdon to visit this place because it's incredible as well. And you can get a sandwich from the deputy mayor for another 12 days.
Yeah. Yeah. You should come to Huntingdon, and you should come to Commemoration Hall because it's amazing. And also, fairly soon, the Huntingdon Visitor Centre is going to be in the front of the Commemoration Hall, so you can come out and find out more about Huntingdon. And even better, you can come here on the bus.
Yes, I recommend the busway B to everyone traveling from Cambridge to Huntingdon. It's probably one of the better options. And I have to say, like, you know, just as a little anecdote to end with, my partner, who's driving everywhere, he lives in Newmarket, and he's very much opposed to any form of charging, and we have very interesting debates. He said, like, you know what, I would actually consider taking the bus if it didn't take 2 hours, if it was like a half an hour bus from Newmarket to, let's say, Fulbourn or Cambridge City, which it can be if you don't have the bus at the moment. It goes through like all the villages. You can have like a slow route and a fast route, depending on which one you choose. If it was comfortable and it had Wi-Fi, and I was like, look, the busway actually does have Wi-Fi and it works. And I know that his experience going with buses in Cambridge is, the City 1, City 3 routes I don't have, so you can't actually do any work. We're both like very obsessed about productivity and like being the most efficient people ever. So we need to work. We need to do our work on the bus. And he said that there's no way. And actually, when he's in his car, like, well, I can listen to something. I can listen to a podcast or to something for work and be in a comfortable space. But I would consider the bus. And I think that's the question to think about is like, at what point people actually make the switch. Like, is it about the time? Is it about the, how much you have to walk to the bus stop? Is it about when you're waiting there? And I do agree with David's point. Like, so many times, especially in the winter, when we had those -9, -8 temperatures, I was freezing in the bus stop. It was so windy. It was raining everywhere. So many of the bus stops around where I live don't have even a cover. So you're like completely like, if you forget your umbrella, even when it's windy, like you can't, you just get to work completely soaked after like all the bus stop experience. And I think those things like do put people off, because if I had a car, of course I would be like much more comfortable that day than if I'm waiting the bus stop in -2 degrees or -9 in some days. I remember the day with the snow. I made a little TikTok about like going the bus stop in the snow. Like, it was a very dangerous experience. But so was driving then, to be honest. Any final thoughts on the topic?
I just want to say, I said some nice things about John Morris earlier, which I now retract, because he just described David and I as the ugly twins, which is completely unacceptable. So do one, Morris. That's all I'm saying to that. I just think it's a complex issue, and it's lovely to have a chance to have an open debate about it, and we should do more of these things as well, because there's been really good engagement as well. There's like 40 odd comments on the feed now.
I tuned into the video earlier on. I'm afraid I had to go to a meeting, but we've got this situation now where we have a parish council, a district council, a county council, and a combined authority. And then in Cambridge you've got the GCP, and then you've got the integrated care system, and you've got the police and crime commissioner, but none of them actually have any power. And so you have the situation where, to change how the buses are run in Cambridgeshire, regardless of the structures it's doing in, we have to go to Whitehall. And that level of centralisation is just not an efficient way of doing things. The structures need redoing somehow, but it's not enough to redo the structures. It's also about power coming down. Just speaking personally, that also means keeping taxes, so that taxes can actually be used locally. But obviously that's fairly large scale constitutional change.
So next time I think there are a lot of questions being asked about the different types of taxation, some of course which are not in local authority control, which are in central government control. So perhaps for our next conversation here in Huntingdon we can invite the local MP to give some of his thoughts about this. Like, what do you think? Like, let us know in the comments.
We saw Jonathan. I didn't see it, but Jonathan was out walking this morning, didn't we? We should have dragged him in, shouldn't we? He was on the phone, so.
Yeah, and similarly, maybe like a conversation with the local MP for Cambridge as well, and some others around the combined authority area as well. It would be quite interesting because I think a lot of this is like local and national conversation in terms of especially some of the interesting questions and comments around different forms of tax. Yeah.
Can I give an example of this? And I'm not making so you can tell my party by my jumper. I'm not making a party political point here because I know Labour happen to be talking about this. But the rate system we have desperately needs reform. Firstly, the rates are too damn high, but also they are so inflexible. I think I'm right in saying that the only thing district can do is discretionary relief for charities and CIOs and KICs, I think. But there is no scope to do stuff that is interesting or imaginative. Imagine if we could do something that said, we will, and this is not policy, this is just me spitballing. If we could do something that said, if you pay everybody a living wage, and you take on a number of apprentices, and you are environmentally responsible, we'll reduce what you have to pay in rate. Even better, so at the moment the rates go back to the centre and are dished back out for the most part. Now I think there's a proposal actually from the current government to change that, where 50% can be kept locally. Yeah. I think that would be a real step forward, assuming that it's kept and can be used, isn't ring fenced for certain things, so it can actually be used. I mean, one of the I think the criticisms you can make of a lot of the devolution deals is that they're a way to get local or regional government to deliver national government priorities. And that that's never, that might be more efficient, you might be more responsive, but you're never going to build the sort of community ownership you want. You're never going to build the sense of place that you want. If ultimately you say, well, we've got money for this, we don't actually want to spend it on that, we'd rather spend it on this, but central government has said we have to spend it on this. I mean, and you see that cascading all the way down through the different structures of local government. Sorry, hay fever is kicking in. And that is a frustration.
It is. Yeah, it really is. And also the actual levels of rate, which are set by central government, not by district council, are absurdly high in places like Huntingdon and St Neots, aren't they? And that's a massive barrier to starting and running a successful business.
Yeah. And if we could do something like if you set up a new business, at the moment I think you set up a new business, you start paying the full whack on rates. Even if we could offer a couple of years taper, to help a new business, would be something.
So my friend Claire, I know about this. There's a disused down Cromwell Road in St Neots, a disused training centre for one of the businesses. She was offered to use that for 6 months free of charge. To be used as some sort of community facility. Just for 6 months, you could have built some stuff in there. It would have been brilliant. The rates bill for that for 6 months was £134,000 as well. And so that project never went ahead, and that building sits empty, and will continue to sit empty, and it's just crazy,
Is that at the top end of Cromwell Road?
It's near the tip. Oh yeah, see, don't start that. That's a whole new. We can have the St Neots special. That's very controversial, David. That's very naughty.
I'm always happy to be involved in a controversial debate.
But I don't know. I mean, it is that. It's examples like that where the sort of scope for doing something imaginative is really limited, and that is frustrating.
Yeah, I think that's like a topic we can. I think that's. I have a lot of examples now from my area in Abbey in Cambridge, because there are like a few potential developments, and like one of the things we're thinking about with some of the independent businesses is how could you have maybe like a part of the street with local businesses that could be supported by some of the funding for the project to actually have the space for free, like even like or a very reduced rate for like a year, like to kind of see if the startup works. And I'm also like quite keen as someone who has because one of my jobs outside, speaking about second jobs and the controversial debate about MPs, but I'm the co-director of one small, not-for-profit organization, and we don't have an office, and we don't have like the funding in place because it's only like 2 people part-time to have an office. And one of the things we're speaking about more with a lot of businesses in Cambridge is when you have, especially not-for-profit or a charity, and you don't have enough revenue to have an office space, to have buildings that are like some of them not used. So there's so many companies like law firms, software companies, and so on who have reduced use of the building because of working from home, and actually allowing some of the space that's often within the communities where the charities and small organizations operate to use some of that office space when they need it for like a board meeting, for example, or for like a focus group or something like that. So that's something that is really interesting, but often, as you say, David, it's really restricted by, like, a lot of the funding is restricted by central government regulations on this. But we're going on to the different topic now. So today was about the buses and the congestion charge proposals. So I hope you did enjoy the conversation. I see a lot of comments here, like a lot of good engagement. So let us know what topic would you like next. So next time, again in Huntingdon with Stephen and with David and with others, perhaps.
Oh. Well, we should invite Mr. Ginobili.
Or any local people who want to get involved in the conversation.
Yes.
As well, from all sides.
Yeah.
So let us know what topics would you like approach next time. Like, we just thought it would be like a good opening topic of conversation because everyone is speaking about it at the moment, at least in Cambridge City, but also other areas around the proposals of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. But there's so many other controversial debates to be had, so let us know your most controversial idea in the comments you'd like approach next. So thank you very much for watching. I will end the live stream now.
Bye, everyone.
See you later.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.